was a time in which the black community was the most anti-war community in the history of the American empire, but here come Barack Obama dropping 71 bombs every day, 26,117 in 1 year in 7 countries, walking around with the Nobel Peace Prize. That's a key sweat moment. Something just ain't right.
All right, so like I said 1,000,001 times on my channel, it's a different perspective. It's a different type of tools that you have at your discretion when you are running third party. You know what I'm saying? You can critique, you can attack, you can defend, you can essentially say anything you want about Republicans and whatever plagues their party, and you can talk about Democrats and everything that's wrong with them. When it comes to Cornel West, you know you're gonna get one thing for sure, and that's honesty. Now, you know, when it comes to being consistent, which, you know, I'm pretty sure you already watched a video where, you know, Cornel West is now switching to independent party, which I got something to say about that. But one thing you're gonna get for sure is honesty. And one thing that a lot of people either they miss, they forget, or they just want to ignore, or it's not brought up enough and discussed in detail, is the truth when it comes to Obama, when it comes to the legislation that he has passed. And we kind of, I don't know, it feels like we almost give him a pass in a sense, you know what I'm saying? So when I heard this interview with Dr. Cornel West on The Hill, and he dropped bombs, I mean, no pun intended, but I mean, he was able to just express and tell the truth about the Democratic Party and the faults of Obama. You know what I'm saying? So without further ado, let's go ahead and watch it so we can have this conversation.
One of the cornerstones of his platform, speaking at an anti-war event sponsored by a nonprofit organization, Code Pink, yesterday. Dr. West unleashed on the pro-war zealots in Washington. Let's watch.
There was a time in which the black community was the most anti-war community in the history of the American empire, but here come Barack Obama dropping 71 bombs every day, 26,117 in 1 year in 7 countries, walking around with the Nobel Peace Prize. That's a key sweat moment. Something just ain't right.
Here to break down the urgency to establish peace in Ukraine and the forces opposing it is Dr. West himself, along with Code Pink's national co-director, Danica Katovich. Guys, welcome to the show. Dr. West, I want to get your immediate reaction to a lot of the labor unrest that we're seeing across the country right now, despite the fact that Joe Biden claims to be the most pro-union president in history.
Well, I mean, part of it is just it's part of the blowback. You see, Biden has been rationalizing corporate greed for a long time. You ask anybody in Delaware about the credit card companies, ask anybody on Wall Street about how Biden is actually the recipient of millions and millions of dollars. So part of it has to do with his hypocrisy. So in that sense, it's just a matter of just telling the truth. And that's why I'm blessed to stand here with my dear sister, Danica, because Code of Pink has been a leaven in a loaf. It's been one of the forces for good. And it is calling the question, not just militarism, but American imperialism. It's a critique of the empire, a critique of those 800 military units around the world and all that money going to military-industrial complex and hardly any money left for jobs with a living wage, health care, quality education.
Dr.
Bars.
West, staying on this topic of war, obviously last night you were at the Code Pink event, and today you are coming to us live from a protest event that Code Pink just did in the Hart Congressional Building this morning. In Bernie Sanders' offices, as I understand it, as it was described last night. Can you talk a little bit about the choice to go and protest at progressive offices about the anti-war issue, especially as we're talking on the eve of House Leader Kevin McCarthy being ousted from the speakership position, in part because of tension between the Freedom Caucus, who wanted to put limits on funding to Ukraine, and basically the rest of the establishment on both sides of the aisle, including to the disappointment of some progressives, seemingly all of the squad members and the self-described progressives on the left.
Well, the progressives just need to be exposed. Their accommodation to militarism. Now, it was, of course, Code Pink, my dear sister Medea Benjamin, and my dear sister Danica, who made that decision. And I love Bernie Sanders. He's my dear brother. He's wrong. And I don't know what you get a chance to speak your mind on this, my dear sister.
Yeah, of course. You know, the working class.
Hey, he said, what about the progressives? They need to step their game up. He said, hey, you guys are participants of this. Step your game up. Ain't nobody else saying that.
In the United States can't be fooled when we have trillions of dollars in debt and suffocating debt, student debt, medical debt, when we have over hundreds of thousands of people who are unhoused in this country, in the wealthiest country in the entire world, in the entire history of the world. The working class can't be fooled when you tell us that we don't have enough money for healthcare, we don't have enough money to fund public colleges, we don't have enough money for infrastructure or public transportation, and you can mobilize over $100 billion for Ukraine in just over a year. And when we should have progressive leaders in Congress, we should have some progressive Democrats calling for less austerity and more money for the people when they can mobilize over $100 billion for war and $800 billion, almost $900 billion for the Pentagon budget next year. And we don't have a single champion in Congress calling for this or diplomacy in Ukraine.
Dr. West, I want to stick to that point that Danica just made about the funding to Ukraine. So a CNN poll came out August 4th by SSRS that showcased 54% of Americans, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, do not want additional funding for Ukraine. You're a presidential candidate. What would your message be? And Danica, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well. What's the message to conservative voters, Dr. West, who may not necessarily be looking at you as a candidate, but I do think you may have a compelling argument that some conservatives may be open to?
Well, first and foremost, you want to bear witness to an anti-imperialist, anti-war stance because it's right, because it's moral. If 2% of the population believe that, I'm going to say it anyway. If 98% of the population says it, I'm going to say it. Now, certainly I want more of my fellow citizens to be persuaded. But it's first and foremost a moral and a spiritual witness against the American empire, shaping the world in its own interest, tied to corporate profits, and losing sight of the humanity of those Frantz Fanon called the wretched of the earth. This is AFRICOM in Africa. It's what happened in Haiti. It's in Latin America, and so forth. So that we shall see. I'm going to fight. I'm going to be consistent no matter what.
So I wish you would have taken a stronger stance. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, it feels like he's saying, hey, you know, the militarization of America, trying to dominate the world essentially is a no-go. I get that. He could easily just say, hey, if I was to get into office, I'm going to have a 1, 2, 3 ABC plan on ending this war. If it don't end, we bailing out. Because we can't continue to inject our resources into this war. We're supposed to be anti-war. We need to try to do it more in a diplomatic way, like figure something out. But throwing more money at it is just going to continue the fight. And then more people are going to be more upset that you're putting more money into that than you are at home. You know what I'm saying? So I do understand, you know, the reasons why where we are assisting Ukraine, but like, hey, whoa, let's try to figure out an exit strategy. We can't allow this to last like the Iraq war. Like, that's just a no-go. You know what I'm saying? So that would have been a more solid answer. Like, Cornel West, you need to invite me onto your team, brother. I got you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dr. West. And, the Republicans aren't exactly against funding for Ukraine for the same reasons Code Pink is. They don't want to funnel all of this war money, the Pentagon budget and foreign military aid into things like that matter, like healthcare, accessibility, and that sort of thing.
I think it's a really important.
Hey, that sounds like shots fired to old boy. Like, hey, we aren't on the same team right here. Like, you want to stop the spending for a whole different reason.
Point, Danica, and I love to mention that when we had an opportunity to interview Marjorie Taylor Greene on this show, and I asked her more broadly whether she supported cuts to the military budget, she said no, despite being opposed to the war in Ukraine. So I do think it's important to ask conservatives where they do plan to spend the money in the interim and whether or not their objection to war is as holistic as it might seem as first blush. I do want to stay on one of the points that Shermichael raised just now about the potential appeal that you have in a general election context, Dr. West. Since we last spoke, RFK Jr. has indicated that he now is likely to leave the Democratic Party. He plans to make this announcement on October 9th to run as an independent as well. He is someone who has been perceived to be an anti-war candidate as well, at least, again, when it comes to the war in Ukraine. So I wondered if I could get your reactions to that news, Dr. West, and whether you think it will have a negative, positive, neutral impact on your own campaign.
Well, it's hard to say. I salute my dear brother RFK Jr. I wish he opposed the war against Palestinians. That's one starting point right there. But I think he's got some very important things to say, and we'll see what his announcement is about this coming Monday. I've got an announcement myself coming up in the next couple of days, but I'm just going to throw that out there and see. But I want to salute both of you because we got this wonderful interplay between Harvard and Morehouse. And it's a beautiful dialectic on television. I can tell you that right now. And black folks too. Ooh, looking so good, looking so beautiful. I salute you.
Dr. West, I want to ask you this question. So about 90+% of black voters voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Joe Biden made that statement on the Breakfast Club that you ain't black if you don't vote for me. Here we are, for about 4 years in. The status of many urban communities across our country haven't improved. When I go back to visit my family in New Orleans, a lot of people are still struggling, it's still worse off. What would you say to African Americans who are disgruntled, who aren't happy, and they're looking for somebody else, but Democrats will say, but Biden is the best option? What do you say to that?
Well, one, is very clear that large numbers of precious black folk who are not just rejecting Biden, but some of them are moving in a neo-fascist way, more and more supporting Trump, especially the black brothers. And I want to say to them that if they're indeed frustrated with Biden, they ought to look my way. They ought to look toward the legacy of Martin King. They ought to look toward the fight against poverty and homelessness. They ought to look toward jobs with a living wage. They ought to be in solidarity with the UAW strikers. And most importantly, they ought to respect themselves enough to think for themselves. Don't let anybody think for them. That, for me, is the most important thing. Because, see, black self-love and black self-respect, and that's true for human self-love and human self-respect, in the end, is so crucial. So you won't be seduced and bamboozled by anybody. That's why I'm a jazz man in politics. Because when you're a jazz man and a jazz woman, you're not bamboozled by anybody. You wrestling with your own voice and trying to transfigure your own wounds into a sound that touches the souls of others. That's a great tradition. That's my tradition. And I'm going to be faithful to it until death.
Danica, before we wrap, it's such a wonderful kind of scoop to get you right from the...
All right, so they're going to talk about something else, which doesn't really matter. All right, so a few key takeaways. One, I love how he is able to speak truth and able to make you understand in a relatable way. Like, does that make sense? He's able to not politicize the argument or the topic. You know what I'm saying? And this is one thing, reading a lot of books regarding Martin Luther King, and I see how Cornel West kind of uses Martin Luther King's strategy. You have to make the situation relatable to whoever you're trying to speak to. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. You understand what anti-war means. If you think war is fine and you just love the destruction and the murders and the killings of people, then of course this conversation is not for you. But if you understand war is not good, America should not be participating in wars. Simple. Republicans understand that. Democrats understand that. The warmongers, they're in their own category. That's something that both voters can stand behind. If you understand the funding that is being funneled to the war is not being properly invested at home into healthcare, into education, into wages, into X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's a whole list. I'm pretty sure we can create a whole list. Republicans understand that. Democrats understand that. That is the beautiful part. It's not, you don't always have to politicize and try to, create your own talking points to dunk on the other side. Politics is boring like that. We want those real, authentic, genuine conversations. And it feels with Dr. Cornel West, we get that. Now, it's a whole different story. If he got into that White House, would he do it? I don't know. I can't tell the future. I don't know deep down inside his heart. I don't know. But at least he has the history to back up what he's presenting now. You know what I'm saying? So once again, if you disagree with me or if you feel like Cornel West is wrong, incorrect, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's fake, he's phony, let me know in the comments down below. And like always, let's have that conversation.